Hello. It is Friday. It's April 1st, 2016, April Fool's Day. I don't get into all that stuff. But it is first day of April, and it's time for something we do weekly. It's called Friday's Flashback. We missed last Friday because I was on vacation. I had just gotten back. But I like to do something on Fridays where we go back into the past. Now, normally I've gone and picked up some great sermon or some line in a book from one of the great writers of the past, whether it be Smith Wigglesworth, the great preacher, or even Kenneth Hagin, the one who's gone on to be with the Lord now. I go back and pick up things that are very wise and could really help you. From Frank Bartleman's book, Azusa Street, 1906, from that Azusa Street revival, I like to flash back and see what they had to say. But I feel to do something different right now, maybe for a few weeks. For Friday's Flashback, I feel it's time to go back in history and flash back to Walnut Cove and how it is that this move of God in Walnut Cove came to be. I'll go back and say, I'm just going to tell you my personal story. I grew up in Walnut Cove all my life. I didn't know anything else. I was even born in Stokes County. I was born in Danbury, the county seat, while there was still a childbearing unit there. That ended not long after I was born. So I'm a Stokes County girl through and through. Walnut Cove was my home. I'm going to tell you the truth, though. I never liked Walnut Cove. I can remember as a child, I didn't want to stay here. I can't pinpoint exactly why I didn't like it. I know that as I became a teenager, that dislike turned into, I hate to say it, but it was hatred. I hated this town. A lot of it had to do with the fact that I grew up in a time that the races didn't mix the way they do now. When I started elementary school, the schools weren't even integrated around here yet. So I grew up in this little town, and I always felt like it was a very racially divided town. People of my parents' age, would always say, well, we've always gotten along fine here in town. But when we had restaurants in town that until 1969, black people couldn't even go sit at the counters, they had to go to the back door, then we didn't always get along fine. So I hated Walnut Cove. All I could think, all through high school is, I got to get out of this town. When I went off to college, I thought, yes, I have escaped. I went to Chapel Hill to school. I thought, this is it. I'll never go back. I'll go visit Mom and Daddy. I love the old family farm in Walnut Cove. But there was no love lost here between me and this town. Well, ended up living in Kernersville after I got out of college. I lived in Kernersville for 5 years, and I noticed I kept moving closer and closer back to Walnut Cove. From Chapel Hill, and then I moved to the Colfax end of Guilford County, and then all of a sudden I was in Kernersville and Forsyth County, and then all of a sudden I'm in Walkertown, and on the Walnut Cove side. And I'm thinking, I'm getting closer and closer to back where I grew up. I don't want to do this. So mentally, my bags were packed. I just knew I was moving out west one day. I knew that we were going to live in Colorado or Montana or Wyoming. We were going to minister to the Indians or something. I had all these grandiose thoughts, of what we were going to do. So even though I was physically still in this area, mentally I was somewhere else. Wasn't going to stay here. Well, I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget how to tell you this flashback. In 1993, it turned out that if I bought my old family home, the one I grew up in, which was still on Grandpa's farmland, that I would be able to stay home with my children. At the time, I only had 2, and I thought, that's worth it. I will make that sacrifice. So we bought the old house I grew up in, but my mind was still saying, it's temporary. I'm out of here. A friend of mine at my church, her name was Heather. Her mother, Betty, said, tell Leslie it could be that she's had to go back to the old neighborhood because there's people there that she needs to lead to the Lord. And that sort of riled me a little bit. Betty's precious, and she was exactly right. But it riled me a little bit. I was thinking, no, I don't want to stay here. I want to go win souls out west somewhere. It's temporary. So 93, we moved into the old house that I grew up in. And 95, I had my son, and I was able to mostly stay home with my children. I worked part-time for a little while. And all of a sudden, one night at my church, a pastor came from, I'm thinking, Indiana. His name was Brother Joe Bulger. He preached a sermon about how after he got saved, he used to be a drunk who got thrown into the drunk tank, as they used to call it, in the jail. And after he got saved, God told him he had to go back to that. He had to go preach to the men who still weren't delivered from alcohol addiction the way he used to be. He had to go back. The name of that sermon was called Sometimes You Have to Go Back. As soon as he preached that night in the mid-90s, I was inside of me. I knew it was me. I knew I've got to go back to Walnut Cove. I said, God, I know you're not going to do this to me, right? I don't want to go back to Walnut Cove, to that stifled little racially divided town where everybody knows your business and everybody talks about you. That's the way I saw it then. Well, I just kept mum about it. 1996. I think it was Valentine's Day, actually. That night I had a dream that changed my life. I dreamed, I'll make it short, I dreamed that I was with some people from my church in Winston-Salem, where I was. But all of a sudden I had to leave those people. And I had to leave them to scale this mountain, this snowy mountain. And I started to scale that mountain. It was like I had to climb and just leave behind the people I was so close to at my old church. And then all of a sudden I looked and I was climbing a mountain and there were Indian blankets. I still don't understand all of this. There were Indian blankets pinned together and they were starting to come apart. And I was just swinging on them going, woo, looky, looky. And all of a sudden I saw a friend of mine. And I don't want to use her name without her permission. I will call her Jane. Jane Doe, that's what we use for people that's anonymous. So Jane, that's not a real name. Jane said, Leslie, you need to quit playing. This is serious. And I woke up abruptly. Now, I had not seen that friend of mine in many years. We grew up together in school, but in high school we sort of drifted apart. Not in a bad way, just the way friends do. And all of a sudden I had this feeling inside me. Oh dear, she was one of my Walnut Cove friends. I had to leave my church friends in Winston and go back to where Jane was in Walnut Cove, and she was telling me, this is serious, Leslie, quit playing. In other words, there's no time to lose. All I could think about was Walnut Cove suddenly, and I was just furious. Why is Walnut Cove resounding in my brain? I just had a baby. I wanted to enjoy my life till I moved out west, I thought. Then all of a sudden, a year passed. Still had that dream on my mind and my friend Jane. Dreamed another dream that added to the desperation I was feeling. I dreamed that I was back at my old junior high school, Southeastern Junior High, it's now middle school, in Walnut Cove. And I had to leave again my old church friends from Winston-Salem. I had to walk away from my Winston-Salem friends, and there was a circle of people that had formed around, I think it was the small gym area of my old middle school. We'll call it middle school. It was junior high for me. And the circle was not complete till I walked there. And when I walked, oh, God, thank you, Jesus. When I walked and made that circle complete and took the hands of the people on either side of me, who I thought it was interesting were primarily black people from my town. And I was like, I think there was maybe one or two other white people I saw. But I had to take hands, and when I did, the circle was complete. And as soon as I joined hands with those people, I saw a steeple begin to rise into the sky. Woke up abruptly. Again, I'm thinking, Walnut Cove, Walnut Cove. God, what are you telling me? It sounds like you want to start a church or something in Walnut Cove. But there are already lots of churches. What has this got to do with me? I knew deep down what it had to do with me, but I still was fighting that. Don't do this to me, God, please. Walnut Cove. Well, I'm going to end the story very soon and make a part 2. But in 1998, I had my 4th child, still living in Walnut Cove, still mentally moving out west someday soon. My health was not great after I had that baby. Just busy, overwhelmed with life. When she turned a year old, 1999 in May, I remember I was very, very sick. I think I was still nursing her and had an infection from that. So my husband at that time took the children, even the baby, took them to Mount Airy to see his grandmother. I was at home alone. And I remember being in bed just miserable, not only in body but in soul, because I knew what I was called to do and wouldn't admit it. And all of a sudden, as I was lying there in the bed, I began to quote Isaiah chapter 6. You know, when he saw King Uzziah, King Uzziah had died, and he saw the Lord. And he said, woe is me, I'm undone, I'm a man of unclean lips. And then God said, who will go? And Isaiah said, here am I, send me. I remember lying in bed that day, and I just threw my hands up, and I said, here am I, Lord, send me. I think it was right then in May of 1999 that I truly answered the call to what I was supposed to do in Walnut Cove. Not totally, because I still was disobedient for a while, but that's when I first knew I got to do it. So in September of 1999, we had the first prayer meeting for revival in Walnut Cove. I'm thinking it was September 13th or 14th, not sure. But on the calendar, it was Yom Kippur. I remember that, either Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. I'd have to go back and check. But we invited 3 Walnut Cove people, 2 ladies from King who went to my church in Winston, and then my family. And we had a prayer meeting there. I remember one of the Walnut Cove ladies was going to church out at what was then First Assembly in Winston-Salem, where they taught about the baptism of the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in other tongues, but she'd never experienced that. And I said to her, do you want to experience that? She said, oh, I'd love to. I said, then how about right here in my living room? I laid hands on that woman, and when I did, she began to speak in other tongues as if she was giving a message in tongues. Had never done it before. There was none of this blah, 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 just syllables. No, beautiful, unknown tongues began to roll out of her, and I knew then, God, you want to do something so incredible in Walnut Cove. That was in September of 99, the first prayer meeting where we were saying our goal is revival in Walnut Cove. We continued through that year into 2000, having irregular prayer meetings for revival. And in the spring of 2000, I got really busy. Kids busy with dance classes, all sorts of things going on. And I said, we're really busy. Let's put the prayer meetings on hold for the spring and summer. We'll start back in the fall. Well, you won't believe what happened to me in the fall. I disobeyed God. I did not start the prayer meetings back. Part 2, we'll go on with this. But that's your Friday's flashback, because we're documenting how the revival in Walnut Cove that's going on right now, how it began oh so long ago. Part 2's coming maybe next week, but you'll get to hear it. Love you all. Thanks for listening.